Welcome to Guerrillapreneur, the Art of Waging Small Business Warfare podcast, teaching Davids how to defeat Goliaths. Now here's your host, Mark Anthony Peterson.
Welcome back to the podcast for entrepreneurs, startups, and business mavericks. If you're not a maverick, you don't have to go home, but you got to get up out of this podcast. In this podcast, we teach entrepreneurs how to defeat the corporate giant. Just like in the story of David and Goliath, David defeated a much taller and stronger Goliath, not by fighting the giant in hand-to-hand combat, but by using technology. A slingshot. The slingshot allowed the smaller David to attack from a distance that minimized the advantages that Goliath had over the smaller David. My name is Mark Anthony Peterson. I'm a serial entrepreneur, a futurist, and the managing executive at Serial Consulting, a leading small business strategy and technology consulting firm. I am also the author of the book Guerrillapreneur, Small Business Strategy for Davids Wanting to Defeat Goliaths, which is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and iTunes. This podcast is brought to you by Serial Consulting. An idea can launch a business, a strategy can take it global. I am fresh back from the TechCrunch Disrupt conference in San Francisco, and boy am I fired up. I saw some of the world's best tech and got a chance to listen to some of the biggest and baddest sharing economy companies in the world talk about the future of their companies. I grabbed some great audio, and I can't wait to put those out in future episodes. If you haven't already subscribed, you need to do so now so that you don't miss audio from some of these great companies that were at this event. But today is episode 34. That means Guerrillapreneur news about the sharing, gig, and circular loop economies that's expected to grow to $335 billion by 2025. So what are we talking about this week? Robots paying taxes, the top 10 gig employers, child care joins the sharing economy, and Airbnb and Uber are under attack. These and many more stories fit to talk about in today's Guerrillapreneur news. So what's first in Guerrillapreneur news? Should we make robots pay taxes? This topic came up out in San Francisco at the TechCrunch Disrupt conference. There were so many robotics companies out at the TechCrunch Disrupt conference that were going to displace workers. And the question is, how are you going to, one, support those workers, and two, replace the revenue that goes to state and local governments that comes from labor-related taxes? Governments around the world, Canada, US, and the EU, are considering taxing the owners of robots. According to a September 18, 2017 MarketWatch article entitled Why Robots Should Pay Taxes, explains that artificial intelligence and machine learning and automation are set to eliminate 25 million jobs by 2027, impacting the service and manufacturing industries the most. The National Bureau of Economic Research analysis suggests that without changes to the current U.S. tax system, the rise of robots could lead to a massive increase in income inequality. G7 labor ministers in Canada state that up to 15% of Canadian jobs could be lost to automation over the next 2 decades. The jobs at most risk to this robot automation: farm and construction workers, accountants, lab technicians, and salespeople. I attended a lecture at the TechCrunch Disrupt conference by Mr. K. Fu Lee, and he discussed his book, AI Superpower. During his lecture, he predicted that all of these types of jobs would be vulnerable and that the only ones that AI would not wipe out would be those more creative jobs, like fashion designer. And that's what he actually encouraged his daughter to go into. The idea to tax robots actually was proposed by Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates because the U.S. tax code heavily favors capital over labor. Many experts are arguing that the tax deductions associated with capital should be reduced as automation and robotics have a greater impact on the economy. You have two very sound arguments at the center of this debate. Without taxing robots, some argue that income inequality will grow to be so great that the economic pie will start to implode on itself. Others argue that when you put robotics and automation into the economy, you're going to get the lowest cost and highest quality means for producing, which means the pie is going to expand because there will be additional cash for reinvestment. To me, the wild card in all of this is AI, the artificial intelligence or the machine intelligence at the center of the new economy. Because as machines learn to make machines, human workers are going to have to continue to climb the skill ladder in order to avoid obsolescence. At the TechCrunch Disrupt conference, I saw a very cool delivery robot made by Kiwi. That's going to eliminate the delivery person. However, it puts more attention on the creative aspect of making the food and packing the robot for delivery. But there are already AI-powered smart kitchens that can mimic a chef, mimic its recipes, and even the arm motions the chef go through in preparing those recipes that will eventually eliminate the chef. I've talked about it in earlier episodes. Go back through and check out some of my earlier episodes on cloud-based kitchens, and you'll see where these trends are going. Humans will have to climb the skill ladder out of those jobs into new jobs in order to remain relevant. As automation and AI pushes human workers higher on the ladder, our influence in the economy will be greatly diminished. Maybe that's why Elon Musk is pushing his new product, the Neuralink, which will link human brains with supercomputers, giving us the ability to stand side by side with AI so that we can participate in the future economy. Musk may be making the point that the only way for the human species to survive is to become transhuman. Or he could just be smoking too much weed. What's second in Guerrillapreneur news? Fit Small Business announces its top 10 gig employers of 2018. In the August 29th, 2018 edition of azbigmedia.com, Fit Small Business released its top 10 gig employers. To create the list, Fit Small Business created a database of U.S. gig companies and then evaluated them using their minimum criteria. That criteria is made up of average hourly pay, employer commission, which is the percent of fees taken by each gig employer from the freelancer, geographic availability, the number of markets in which the gig employer is active in the U.S., quality of life, which looks at employee rankings on sites like Glassdoor and Indeed, which represent how freelancers feel about gigging for specific employers, barriers to entry, the type of equipment a gig worker needs to own in order to freelance, and then finally, tax implications. FitSmallBusiness.com looked at only 1099 employers. They excluded anyone that had W-2 employees. I like their minimum requirement criteria, but I'm surprised that they didn't have the most important one listed here, which is payment. In a previous gig news episode, I reported to you that one of the biggest factors driving gig worker loyalty were payment terms and payment platforms. How easy is it for them to get paid, and how quickly do they get paid after services are rendered? That's not listed here, but let's forge ahead and see who they ranked in their top 10. Number 10, DoorDash. We know these guys. They provide on-demand restaurant courier services. Number 9, Upwork. These guys have a platform that connects independent freelancers with businesses. Number 8, Favor Delivery. These guys say they're the easiest way to get anything you want in your city delivered to your door in less than an hour. Number 7, Fiverr. These guys provide a platform for employers and freelancers to connect, collaborate, and get work done. Number 6, Freelancer. Freelancer, like Fiverr, provides a platform for employers and freelancers to connect, collaborate, and get work done. Number 5, Hop, Skip, Drive. These guys provide a ride-hailing service for kids. Yes, all the drivers are thoroughly screened, trained, and their focus is helping you get your kids safely from one spot to the next. Number 4, Rover. They buy and sell pet care services, including pet sitting, dog boarding, and walking. Number 3, Guru. Guru is another one of these platforms that links up employers and freelancers to get work done. Number 2, TaskRabbit, which was bought by IKEA, matches freelancers with consumers to get everyday tasks done. And finally, number 1, Care.com. Care.com matches those who need care with caregivers. Now let's examine who's not on the list. The obvious guys: Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, Turo. You know Turo. They let you rent your car out, and they let you keep 65 to 85% of the trip rental price. What about Postmates? They didn't make the top 10. These guys let you deliver using whatever mode of transportation you own: car, bike, scooter, and get paid when you make those deliveries. And Instacart. Instacart matches deliverers with customers who want their groceries brought to their front door. All of these companies, Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, Turo, Postmates, Instacart, they were left out of the top 10 because you have to own an asset, a home, an apartment, a car, a scooter, or a bike in order to participate on their platforms. But isn't that really the intent of the sharing economy? To make sure that we're fully utilizing capital that's already deployed? So I do have a little bit of beef with the Fit Small Business Top 10 because it is an antithesis to the sharing economy. We want to fully utilize capital before we invest in new capital. So I want to encourage those companies that are left off the list to be in the top 5 because they're doing just that, fully utilizing existing capital. However, don't think these guys aren't paying attention. If you've been following this podcast for the last year, you know that Airbnb, Lyft, Uber, Turo, Postmates, Instacart, they have been going out and establishing partnerships to try to lower the barrier of entry in order to get more users on their platform as well as gig workers. Airbnb, in just a few episodes earlier, announced that they were helping people buy houses by providing assurances to banks if you use your house to rent out to Airbnb. Lyft and Uber have tons of different partnerships with car companies to try to get a car in your hands so that you could work for their platform. So they recognize that there are barriers, and they've entered into some incredible partnerships in order to lower those barriers. So I guess instead of me complaining about the Fit Small Business Top 10 ranking, I'm going to have to come up with the Guerrillapreneur Top 10 gig employers in the world. I'm not going to exclude those who are not based in the United States. I'm going to come up with a set of minimum criteria with which to rank and score these companies. If you want to help me come up with criteria, please follow me on Twitter at Guerrillapreneur and send me your thoughts. What's third in Guerrillapreneur news? Childcare comes to the sharing economy. Momni, a sharing platform developed for moms, lets moms sign up and get care or provide care and get money. So moms can set their own price. They can set their own schedule, their own availability, says Carmel Larson, the CEO of Momni. Now, in this economy where there is a shortage of good childcare, the Momni platform lets you set how much you want to pay, whether or not the house has guns, whether or not they have a pool or pets. Those criteria let you filter for a home where you may be comfortable allowing your kids to go for childcare. The Momni platform does not require background checks. which shocked me. Now, as CEO Carmel Larson says, those individuals who opt not to do background checks before listing themselves as caregivers rarely get any business. But I think she's going to end up rethinking that because the platform takes on a certain level of liability by posting individuals on there who have not gone through any screening. So people who can't afford those caregivers who have listed themselves at a higher price because they paid to certify themselves may opt to get someone who refuses to get a background check because they shouldn't be around kids. When she cleans those things up, I think this platform is going to be very hot because child care is a big deal and it's being exacerbated by the gig economy. More and more people are taking odd shifts in order to avoid the child care crisis, but eventually they have to have multiple gig jobs in order to pay the rent. So they need somewhere that they can get quality child care. And this platform could be the gig and sharing economy way to plug in those gaps. I'm going to reach out to Miss Larson and see if I can conduct a Guerrillapreneur Mastermind interview with her and put those tough questions to her. Because I'd like to see this platform thrive and spread across the country. And this is why I also recommend having a board of advisors. If you're going to call yourself the Uber or Airbnb of your industry sector, have somebody on your board that actually knows something about Uber and Airbnb. In this case, Uber and Airbnb launched services that did no screening on the people who provided their gig-related task to consumers, and they got sued. Don't recreate the wheel. Build on what these guys have already established as precedent and make your platform better. What's fourth in Guerrillapreneur news? Airbnb is going to work because being at home sucks. Airbnb got its start as a home sharing service, but that market is under siege. Hotels are doing a great job at fending off Airbnb in the leisure segment all over the world. So as a result, Airbnb has shifted gears and started to focus on the more lucrative business travel by focusing on homes that offer 24/7 access and all sorts of business amenities. According to an article published by Allison Chewing in commercialrealestate.com, Airbnb has launched an effort in Australia to refine and perfect their business offering. Corporate trips are the top growth market in Australia's travel sector, jumping by almost 11% to 21 million travelers over the last 12 months, according to tourism research data out of Australia. Ms. Chewing quotes the Airbnb country manager for Australia and New Zealand, Sam McDonald, stating that globally, Airbnb's work-related bookings more than tripled in the last 12 months. That's on the back of tripling in the last 12 months before that. So there's rapid growth in the business sector, and that gives Airbnb the perfect pivot to move away from the leisure market where they are under global assault. In New York, in March of 2018, Mayor Bill de Blasio signed new laws requiring Airbnb to hand over detailed data on its users. They're also setting heavy fines if the company does not turn this data over. Now, this is going to set the stage for new licensing and new fees that would make home sharing less viable than purchasing a hotel room. According to an August 22, 2018 article in Voices of San Diego, San Diego has all but banned short-term rentals. Their city council decided in August to reject the interest of their local residents who want to keep the short-term listings to all-out ban Airbnb, VRBO, and HomeAway. Now, this is a complete about-face for San Diego because they had marketed themselves as a smart city open to the sharing economy. To add insult to injury, Trader Joe's even sued Airbnb because residents of San Diego were organizing in their parking lots trying to get this ordinance overturned. Trader Joe's suit was ultimately dismissed, but Airbnb is having a bad couple of months. Orlando decided to regulate home sharing. In an August 15, 2018 article from news965.com, explained that the Orlando City Council had passed an ordinance requiring homeowners to register their homes with the City of Orlando and to also purchase a license and meet additional requirements. Homeowners are also required to reside in the home or must be present during booking. Homeowners must pay a year one registration fee of $275. It'll be $100 every year after that if you live in the property, and $125 if you have a non-owner occupied property. Let me get on my soapbox for a minute and get you all fired up. All over the country, you have city councils telling Americans who have purchased assets how they can use them and whether or not they can make money off those assets. You're finding out how few rights you really have when you try to use the assets that you have purchased to go up against the corporate giants who have bought and paid for many of these city councils in order to protect the power that they built. Unfortunately, many of these city councils that are passing these ordinances are led by Democrats, and they are going to find themselves in the crosshairs of millennials who have grown up with the sharing economy, who are workers in the gig economy, and who do not plan to have the world go back to inefficient markets where you waited for 30 minutes for a taxi to find you on the corner. The other question I have for you is, how free are we really? When city councils can limit your ability to make money with assets that you've purchased legally, how different are we from the managed economies of China? When I've talked to you about the Chinese sharing economy, it's wide open. Fewer regulations, and so they have explosive growth. We're finding that the status quo companies are finding ways to use regulation instead of competition and letting market forces do its thing. Taxi cab companies could have easily deployed apps, making it more efficient and easier for consumers to find and hail those taxis. They could have invested in their cars and made it a more comfortable ride. Instead, they wanted to maintain a monopoly, feed you crap and call it caviar, where Uber and Lyft came along and gave you a real alternative, and now these old economy companies are buying their way back in by buying the politician. And this isn't just happening domestically. This sort of battle for the leisure market is happening all over the globe. Taiwan even threatened to legalize Airbnb. I know that sounds good, but legalizing means they're going to put more regulations and fees. The Taiwanese ordinance requires homeowners to register their homes with local governments and to gain approval before they start offering up those rooms for short-term rentals. The approval time can last as long as 180 days. That's a major deterrent. Japan also passed a very similar ordinance. So the empire is striking back all around the globe as it relates to leisure travel. Now, according to the Yahoo article, 1.3 million foreign travelers used Airbnb while in Taiwan. That represents 12% of the total number of inbound tourists. And Airbnb's woes don't end there. China's homestay is booming. Homestay is China's equivalent of Airbnb, except for they offer some really unique services like catering to children and allowing pets. These guys have just started to grow like a weed. According to an August 2018 article in Shine.cn, Homestay's booking service Tujai has 1.2 million rooms globally and 800,000 in China. Tujai's service is available on Ctrip, Elong, Kunair, Tencent, and Alibaba's service platforms, making it one of the top shared accommodation providers in China. Kei-Fu Lee, the author of AI Superpowers, is right. We are now battling it out in two separate hemispheres, two different dimensions, the U.S.-driven sharing economy and the Chinese-driven sharing economy. And their models are different. Different enough that startups cannot thrive in both dimensions. As Kei-Fu Lee stated, you gotta pick one. The Chinese model reminds me a lot of the 1970s and 1980s Japanese keiretsu model, where these systems are fully integrated with powerful players using platforms and loss leaders to drive transactions through their mammoth engines in order to get massive amounts of customer data. The US model is just not like that. You don't see the Ubers of the world also tightly linked to financial interests where they can get pulled through from renting a scooter all the way up to a banking account that then allows you to pay your utilities. You do see that in the Chinese model. Who's going to win? I think it's going to come down to a battle of tech, a battle of who's going to have the most dominant AI, who's going to have the best machine learning and automation and robotics. And this sets the stage for what's fifth in Guerrillapreneur news, because Uber is also under attack. March was a busy month for New York City Council and Mayor Bill de Blasio, because they also passed legislation that put a cap on the number of new Ubers and Lyft's licenses that can operate in the city. To operate a taxi in New York City, you had to buy a license or a medallion. And in 2013, the cost of those medallions were going for about $1.3 million. That's $1.8 million in today's dollars. Now, since Uber and Lyft have entered the market, the cost of a medallion has dropped to just $120,000. Many independent taxi drivers who own these medallions were hoping that those medallions would be their retirement. They'd be able to sell that license to someone else at an even higher price and retire with the proceeds. Well, they are completely underwater, and they have put pressure on the city council and Mayor de Blasio to stop the sliding trend. According to Mayor de Blasio, this new measure is actually going to help New Yorkers, because he claims that the influx of Uber and Lyft cars are contributing to the traffic and congestion. According to de Blasio, an estimated 40% of Uber cars on the road in New York at any given time are vacant, and they're usually vacant when there's heavy traffic. But here's the flip side of that argument. Having those Uber and Lyft cars on the street also helped provide transportation to parts of New York that were underserved. Many of the boroughs that did not get the kind of taxi support got support when Lyft and Uber came into the market. And if you continue to listen to this podcast, you're going to hear an interview that I'm doing with Dr. Raman Mohammed of Purdue University's Kennard School of Management, who did a study that showed that services like Uber and Airbnb are contributing to reductions in unemployment because they're bringing tourism dollars to parts of New York that had not seen it in the past. So how is Uber going to handle this regulatory assault? Like Airbnb, they're going to pivot. At the TechCrunch Disrupt conference, Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi, please forgive me if I mispronounced your last name, went on to tell the audience that Uber is going to be pivoting away from ride sharing to more electric scooters and bikes, despite the fact that this could hurt profits. Now, this makes sense to some degree, because of the liability that goes along with Uber and all of the problems that Uber has faced when dealing with drivers and its own internal culture. When you move to these individual point-to-point solutions, you alleviate all those types of problems. But as a futurist, I've predicted in past episodes that Uber and Lyft will move even further downstream and become a part of the city infrastructure and manage all transportation for these cities, towns, and municipalities. I'll tell you why it does make sense. Because as we move away from car ownership in a tax system that incents capital, they're going to lose a lot of revenue. And how are you going to replace that? Rider fees and management fees. And that's where Uber and Lyft are going to come in with their platforms that are basically already doing that now, moving across multiple modes of transportation. They're going to replace the current bureaucratic infrastructure and manage that on behalf of many cities and towns. I've talked to you about the importance of the bike and scooter market in China and giving you many details about some of their bigger players like Mobike, who've been recently bought out. But there's other emerging markets where scooters and bikes are taking off. India, for one. Let's run down some of their bigger players. The oldest of the bunch is a company called Baxi, like bike plus taxi. They're a Gurugram-based bike taxi service platform that was founded in 2014 by Ashutosh Jahari and Manu Rana, and they've recently raised $1.4 million in seed funding. The The next company is Bounce. They're based in Bengaluru and was founded in 2015 by Vivekananda Har, Baran Angi, and Anil G. Bounce is a dockless bike sharing company, and these guys raised $12.2 million in seed funding in July of 2018. The next company is Rapido. They were founded in 2015 by Aravind Sanka, Pavan G, and Rishikesh Sir. Rapido has 4,000 bikes in Bengaluru and over 1,000 in Gurugram. They have over 50,000 app downloads. These guys have momentum. The next company is Vygo. Vygo was founded in 2016 by Anand Ayadure, Padmanabhan Balakrishnan, and Sankrit Mittal. Vygo is a dockless scooter company. Their platform lets consumers rent scooters for short one-way trips. And finally, Bikesy, founded in 2016 by Mohit Sharma, Divya Kalia, and Dennis Ching. Bikesy is a bike taxi company for the last mile connectivity. They've raised $315,000 back in January in seed funding. Bikesy also offers an all-women service known as Bikesy Pink. So now you can see why Uber may be pivoting. Everywhere else outside of the U.S., in emerging markets and developed markets, you're seeing a push towards last mile connectivity. Scooters, bikes, and bike taxis. Uber's not going to miss out on that growth, and they're not going to let car-based ride sharing sink the company due to liability. But like I said, I think that's just an interim step. Ultimately, they're going to end up being a utility for local governments, managing all transportation and providing a reoccurring tax base for those local governments. What's sixth in Guerrillapreneur news? Jet Smarter just got smarter because they eliminated all their fees and membership requirements. We reported on Jet Smarter earlier this year, telling you that this company was basically the Uber of the air. They were going to let you buy seats on airplanes that were open and get cheap flights anywhere you wanted to go. At the time they launched their model, they required you to pay a $5,000 a year membership fee and a $3,000 initiation fee for individuals. That's before you could start getting the cheap flights. Well, they just got smarter. According to BusinessInsider.com on August 20th, 2018, they eliminated those fees, and guess what happened? Business took off. Jet Smarter's bookings have already grown by 116% year over year, and shared flight frequency has increased more than 20%. Jet Smarter's growth has come from on-demand flight creation, where members and non-members alike can crowdsource flights on their own time. Jet Smarter connects flyers to more than 300 weekly shared flights with over 800 air carrier partners globally, and routes to and from 170 plus countries worldwide. So very smart move to unlock some of that pent-up demand, because not everybody could plop down $5,000 and $3,000 in an initiation fee. Now, some of what Jet Smarter may have done may have been spurred on by competition from other players like Blackbird. Blackbird is like Uber, except for you can hail a private flight for $225. Blackbird is a San Francisco-based startup that describes itself as a ride-sharing app for the skies. Blackbird partners with about 50 chartered services to offer pre-scheduled private flights or charters in the range of about $225 to $1,000 and up, depending on the trip and how many others are on the plane. Blackbird now has a product called Hitch, where anyone can hop a ride on a private flight the same way you would hail an Uber pool. Now, I don't know how many of you have taken Uber pool, but I took it a lot when I was out in San Francisco. Basically, it's a carpool. The Uber rider's picking up multiple passengers and dropping you out based on a predetermined route. It's a lot cheaper than just taking a Uber car by yourself, and quite frankly, it helps them make the argument to local governments that they are efficiently using the roads and not driving around vacant cars. Bill de Blasio. So Blackbird has picked up on the Uber pool concept to make air travel cheap and convenient. CEO Rudd Davis created Blackbird in part due to his frustration over the worsening traffic gridlock across California. Imagine that. You're sitting in traffic and you think, wow, I should start a company that's just like Uber, but for planes, and that'll get me out of this traffic. That's why I love America, and that's why I'd like to see what's going on in San Francisco spread to more parts of the country. That's why I'm hosting a business pitch contest in Alabama on December the 8th to try to bring a little bit of this tech and investment to the Black Belt South. I'll tell you a little bit more at the end of this podcast. So I think Blackbird may have put pressure on JetSmarter to rethink their fee structure and open it up and be truly more like Uber. I've also talked about Wingly. Now, Wingly had a booth at the TechCrunch conference, except for I could never find anyone working the booth. I wanted to get a little audio to share with you guys, but I couldn't find anyone. But we remember the Wingly guys, right? They have a number of private pilots that they want to match you with, mainly for tourism-related travel. 2 to 3, maybe 4 seaters, and they would take you back and forth across the channel in England. I'm sure they were at TechCrunch trying to get capital so that they could expand their model and be more like Blackbird and JetSmarter. I know what some of you guys are thinking. With all these companies trying to be like Uber, why isn't Uber expanding into managing flights and aircraft? It's a good question, but the two require totally different competencies. Uber has built up capabilities and technologies around matching you with cars in cities and getting you efficiently from point A to point B. Matching you with an airline or an airplane to get you a vacant seat, that part's easy, but flight routes and all of the other operations associated with an airplane are completely outside of the Uber scope. Scooters and bikes, they overlay on that same topography that the cars operate in. So adding them to the platform makes sense. This is why we say at Sierra Consulting, an idea can launch a business, but a strategy can take you global. You have to consider those factors when designing, launching, and growing your business. And I think Uber's done a good job of looking at expansion and ancillary services that they could add to the ride-hailing platform. What's last in Guerrillapreneur news? Vygo, this startup is going to help my son not get an F in statistics. Vygo is a Brisbane, Australia-based tutoring startup that's just raised $500,000 in pre-seed funding to launch their platform. Founded in 2017 by Ben Hallett, Joel Trapani, and Steve Hasty, the startup spent time in the River City Labs and the Muru D Accelerator and graduated in May of 2018. So far, they have 5,000 student profiles on the platform, a third of which are tutors. The platform simply pairs students who've done well in a particular subject with others who are looking for extra support. Why didn't they have that when I was in college? They have plans to take this platform overseas as quickly as possible. Believe it or not, I proposed this exact idea in 2012 to a young man at Tuskegee University who was looking for an idea. And basically I told him, build Fiverr, but for students who need help with their coursework. Like the child care startup Momni, I want to see these guys succeed because there's a great social benefit to what they're offering. Guys, thank you for listening to this episode of Guerrillapreneur News about the sharing, gig, and circular loop economies. If you can't get enough of this Guerrillapreneur news, sign up for our newsletter at Ceyero.com, Ceyero.com. And if you're interested in the Selma Business Pitch Contest, follow us on Facebook at Selma Business Pitch. The contest is going to take place on December the 8th in Selma, Alabama. Subscribe to that Facebook page and stay up to date on all the details regarding the contest. Guerrillapreneurs, please subscribe to the show. Like the show. Make comments about the show. And rate the show. All of that helps us. You can also support the show at patreon.com/Guerrillapreneur. Guerrillapreneurs, Scott Sullivan said it best in episode 7. Be a mace. Sharpen those spikes. And remember, if you're not breaking something, your company might be the next thing that gets broken.
Thank you for listening to the Guerrillapreneur, the Art of Waging Small Business Warfare podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, you may also enjoy the book Guerrillapreneur, Small Business Strategy for Davids Wanting to Defeat Goliaths. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and iTunes. Follow Mark Peterson on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Guerrillapreneur. Now I want to close with a quote from the great Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first, then seek to win. Keep fighting, Guerrillapreneurs.